Well, I don't think I'm going to be able to improve on that. So I want to thank you very much, Tara, for that extremely kind introduction and the excellent joke. So I'm going to talk a bit about the neurobiology of laughter and just to think about how little of it there is, and if there's anybody in the room interested in sort of branching out into different aspects of emotion in the brain. I think it is an area where there's still a huge amount we don't know. And it is very interesting, if we go back to the sort of original work by Charles Darwin, looking at how emotions are expressed in humans and other animals, and he was interested in this from an evolutionary perspective. So the idea that some emotions might be so useful in evolutionary terms that they could have this kind of evolutionary role, be found in a variety of animals and operating in general way along similar lines. And he talked a lot about emotions that we carried on studying since he first talked about it. So emotions like fear and anger and disgust. But he also talks a lot about laughter, and he thought it was an expression of joy. I used to go to London Zoo and get keepers to tickle baboons for him and sort of describe what the animals did, and his lovely descriptions of the animals' eyes brightening. And he thought it was very important, and we just ignored that for the next 150 years. If I look up on, actually I did this last year, but if I go onto Web of Science and just search the terms emotion, expression, fear, I'll get back over 4,700 papers. And if I just switch out fear for laughter, I go down to 250 something papers. There just are very few. If we in fact, if we switch that out for joy, emotion, expression, joy, it still only goes up to 650 something papers. The research into positive emotions is in general dwarfed by the research into negative emotions. And I think it's possibly time to think about approaching that in a different way. You might wonder, well, what does laughter look like in other animals? It was extremely easily seen in apes. This is Coco, the signing gorilla, meeting Robin Williams. She was very interested in human nipples, and that's what's going on there. I'm not going to lie, whole other talk, not very inspiring. But look, what happens, it's hard to tickle a gorilla, and he's actually managing this. If you look at her facial movements and her arms, actually, it's extremely recognizable. It's a very soft sound, gorilla laughter. In fact, laughter sounds in other animals on the whole are gentle, quiet sounds. And then she's just like, let's not waste each other's time. Get the t-shirt off. One of the things that's interesting about humans is that we laugh loud. We broadcast our laughter. So although we are apes and we laugh in a way that's very similar to other apes, the noise we make is different. We aren't the only animal that laughs beyond apes. So Panksepp in the US did really lovely work on rat sort of galactic vocalizations. So they noticed that rats make these distinct vocalizations when they are tickled and when they're playing with other rats. And if you tickle a rat and then stop, it will continue making the sound after to try and get you to tickle it again. So it's making the sound, come on, again. It doesn't sound like laughter. So the gorilla's laughter sounds quite recognizably like laughter, although it's very soft. This is a chirping sound, but it's showing all the same characteristics. And what Panksepp thought is that, so we've seen laughter as an expression of joy, and Panksepp thought that wherever you found laughter in the world of creatures, it was associated with play. Of course, not totally dissociated from joy. Play is a very important behavior to mammals. All mammals play when they're juvenile, some mammals play their whole lives, and to indicate that your intentions are playful, mammals use a number of different signs. So there's what's called play face, so it's very loose, open, unthreatening, kind of smiling mouth. Play is so important to dogs. They have a play bow. So when a dog does that, what it means is everything after this is a game. I might growl, but I'm not angry at you because we are playing. It's again a signifier of intentions. And when there's a noise associated with this, it's laughter from Panksepp's perspective. And Greg Bryant and colleagues published a paper last year or the year before, widening this out, so looking at play vocalizations in a wider range of mammals, which just hasn't really been looked into very much. And they found that mammals vocalize when they're playing across a very wide range of mammals, including really unlikely mammals like cows, weasels, and even things that aren't mammals like social New Zealand parrots. So it seems likely that what we have here is something that if play and these laughter vocalizations are intimately linked and an expression of what we call laughter, maybe there is a lot more laughter out there. Now, from a neurobiological perspective, laughter is different from speech in a couple of ways. So this is somebody talking in our MRI scanner. We're just running it like a as a way to image the vocal tract. So this is somebody talking, And this is an unbelievably complex sequence of events you can see going on here. We're the only animal in nature that can do this kind of thing with their vocal tracts, continuously distort it to produce a change of sounds, millisecond after millisecond, changing the spectral characteristics of the vocal tracts and leading to the different sounds of speech. And it's under a very distinct pattern of voluntary motor control. So when you talk or you sing or you beatbox, you do something voluntary with your voice, you recruit very reliably these lateral motor areas, sensory motor cortex, which are involved in the voluntary control of the voice. When you laugh, like other non-verbal emotional vocalizations, it can be a fully involuntary action, no? And these non-verbal emotional vocalizations, like laughter, look completely different from speech in the scanner. Can you see how there's none of that distortion of the mouth, the tongue isn't moving, the mouth is opening, and she's moving up and down a lot because there's a lot happening at the ribcage, which we'll come back to. But this is literally more like an animal call than it is like speech. So it's a very, very basic way of making a sound. And when it's involuntary, if you think about the last time you were laughing and you could not stop, what you find is that, well, our best hypothesis is that this is controlled under an evolutionarily older pathway, one that we share with other mammals, which runs down the midline from the anterior cingulate down through the periaqueductal gray into brainstem nuclei, and then driving the articulators and the breath control that give you a sound. Now, I think in reality, if you think about how people use laughter, and I'll play you some examples of that, laughter can sometimes bounce back and forth between the two. I think sometimes laughter really is leaning on this extremely involuntary older network, and sometimes laughter can be something that is more intentional, something that's more communicative. And if you think about it as an actual sound, what it relies on very strongly is breath. And actually breath control is extremely important for humans. It's important for all vertebrates. You're all using it right now to stay alive. When you breathe for getting breath in and out of your rib cage, what you do is you use the intercostal muscles between your ribs. You contract them, and that pulls the rib cage up and out, and that creates negative pressure inside the lungs, and air is drawn in. You then just relax them back down under elastic recoil, and the air is pushed back out. Very important. You started doing it as soon as you were born, don't stop. But what that's giving you, if we were to measure just with a chest belt that picks up the movements of your chest wall, we get this nice smooth, sort of almost sinusoidal pattern of movement, and that's metabolic breathing. As soon as we start talking, we take our breath in, and then we use those same intercostal muscles very, very differently. And this is just a demonstration here, but we could have a whole other talk on the relationship between actually how we breathe and how we speak. And what we're doing is we're maintaining a constant subglottal pressure at the glottis, which means that we can actually only breathe the way we do, speak the way we do because of how we breathe. And you're probably thinking, that's quite odd, Sophie. But actually, literally, this is the basis for human ability to speak. If we couldn't breathe like this, we couldn't speak in sentences, we couldn't control the pitch and the rhythm of our voices, we would speak on each exhalation, and it's just a completely different thing. In fact, it's almost like the breath cycle is the unit for planning in speech. You can tell for how long somebody is going to talk by the size of a breath they take in at the beginning of an utterance. So it really is a very important sort of cognitive element to speech. When we start laughing, that changes again. So what happens during laughter is you get very big, very fast deflections of those same intercostal muscles, much bigger than you get for breathing or for talking. And they come very quickly together, and sometimes they come together so quickly that they simply, well, each one of those big deflections is just pushing air out, ha, ha, ha. And if they run together, you get kind of spasms sounds. We don't understand this, but if there is a competition in the motor network between voluntarily breathing, or breathing, voluntarily speaking, and laughing in an involuntary way, the laughter will win. It can overwhelm your motor system in the way that other vocalizations seem to be harder to achieve, exception possibly of crying. And it will stop you talking. It will stop you breathing. It's squeezing air out of you. It's trying to kill you. And it is a relatively dangerous activity. It is not that unusual for people to die laughing. Obviously, don't do that now. But one of the things that this means in practice is if you're listening to somebody talk and something starts to make them laugh, often the first thing you will notice is this lack of the fine control of the intercostal muscles that's giving you the ability to speak. So I'm going to play you a clip now of somebody talking on the Today programme, and she hears something that makes her laugh, and hear what happens to her voice when that starts to happen. She loses control of the pitch of her voice. There's no sound just yet, with the people at the back are worrying. There's no sound now. Now I'm worrying. Oh no, it should be a sound should start in a second.
Singarock's unpopular replacement has now been dismissed, with the Army's popular Chief of Staff, Jack Twat, taking over.
A 40-foot sperm whale, which was stranded in the Firth of Forth for more than 4 days, is now thought to be swimming towards open waters again. It freed itself late last night. Marine experts are hoping to establish this morning whether the whale is finally back at sea.
Good luck to the whale. 8:10 is the time. An investigation is underway.
So if you work with speech and voices like me and emotion, this sort of stuff's got catnip. I love the whole thing. The guy coming down the line has got to say a rude word. I don't know what it's like where you come from, but I'm from Lancashire, and twat is pretty rude. You would not just say that on the radio. And he just goes for it. Nothing to see here, popular Chief of Staff, Jack Twat. And back in the studio, Charlotte Green, she's significant, she's not her own. Somebody whispers to her just as she's about to start reading the news headlines, and they whisper 2 words. They just whisper, Jack Twat. And they are doing that very specifically. They are trying to make her laugh. And at first she's okay. The whale in the Firth of Forth is coping. And then the laughter starts to get her, and she starts to lose control of the pitch of her voice at first. If you're not a native English speaker, you may have thought that it also could sound a bit like she was starting to cry. There's definitely something emotional happening. And then the pitch of her voice shoots right up, and by the end she's continuing to make squeaking noises after she's stopped talking, because now she's fully laughing. Now she doesn't want to do this, and she'll have got in some trouble for this, but that's the power, the kind of extraordinary power of laughter, and its ability to overwhelm your motor system. I never set out to look at laughter specifically. I was working on a wide range of emotional vocalizations, building on work I started with Andy Calder when I was at the APU in Cambridge. And with my PhD student, Disa Sota, we were starting to look at kind of cross-cultural aspects of how people recognize emotion from the voice, because there are hypotheses that say the voice is not very good at expressing emotion. The face is the really good way of sort of telling information about your emotional state. And of course, faces are great. They transmit information all the time. So Disa did several trips out to Namibia, where she was looking at a range of non-verbal emotional expressions, positive and negative, and she was trying to pick up on the work that had been done with faces and see if we could replicate that with the voice, but also add in more positive emotions. And she was working with the Himba in northern Namibia, so she was working with communities who had not been previously exposed to or interacted with people from Europe, or even people from the rest of Namibia. They are a very isolated group of people, and a couple of the men, a couple of times a year, would interact with Angolan cattle dealers, and that's it. So we're not seeing people contaminated by our culture. And if you make recordings of the Himba expressing different emotional states, this will give us some idea. We can actually test people back in London can recognize that. So it's a two-way investigation. Here's an example of an emotional expression being recorded. So absolutely no points there for spotting that he started laughing at the end. And in fact, when you listen, there's other people laughing around him. People are laughing at him, and he's joining in. Anybody guesses what the emotion was he was expressing before then? Did it sound positive or negative? Some people think negative, some people positive. Did it sound high energy or low energy? It's quite high energy. He's actually expressing triumph. Now he knows what it means to celebrate something. That's not an emotion that is so culturally specific that the meaning of it can't really be conveyed across different linguistic communities. He knows what it means to celebrate something. However, his expression of it does not sound celebratory or triumphant to people back in the UK, and vice versa. If you play him someone from the UK going, woo! He doesn't hear that as sounding triumphant. I think we got that from The Simpsons anyway. But this is this is a very good example of an emotion that is not cross-culturally recognised. It's not what Paul Ackman would call a basic expression of emotion. It has meaning across different communities potentially, but it's not. The expression itself is not being recognised. However, the laughter at the end completely is. And in fact, what we found in this study was that. Carefully directing the laser pointer onto my own hand, that's useful. So the facial expressions of emotion that have been shown to have elements of these cross-cultural recognition, anger, disgust, fear, sadness, and surprise, we are replicating that with the voice. So the voice can express emotions that are recognised cross-culturally. It's not just faces that are good at this. And And that we see it, seeing reasonably good recognition in both directions. The English recognise the himba recognise the English. These are the positive emotions that we'd added in: laughter, triumph, pleasure, and relief. And in fact, although there's something funny happening with relief I can take questions on, laughter is the only emotional expression that is comfortably crossing the threshold for being cross-culturally recognised. The English recognise the himba recognise the English. Another study where laughter started to look a little bit strange is when Dieter and I most of the work I'd done with functional imaging was looking at brain systems engaged when you hear voices and speech and the different kinds of information in the voice. So we tried this study with non-verbal emotional expressions, triumph sounds, laughter sounds, fearful sounds, and disgust sounds, because we had two very negative and two very positive groups of emotions in there. None of them are very confusable with each other. And I just wanted to see, what do those same networks look like? Do we see something similar when we have these very meaningful sounds that don't contain the same kinds of acoustic information as speech? And actually it looked quite different. So for example, we get loads of orofacial mirror activation, shown up here in green, when people hear these non-verbal emotional expressions, much more than you would ever see for speech perception, although people can take them absolutely fight to death on a hill about the likelihood that motor involvement is important for speech recognition. It's really important for processing non-verbal emotional expressions. But interestingly, it wasn't equivalent across the different emotional vocalizations. It was really strongly correlated with positive sounds and with high arousal sounds. So the higher the arousal of the sound, the more positive the sounds, the more it was driving these orofacial mirror systems, which meant that in practice, it was the triumph and particularly the laughter sounds that were really giving us this strong orofacial mirror activation. And one of the things we wondered about here was, could this be something that was associated with contagion, behavioral contagion, because some phenomena across social mammals are highly contagious. So yawning is something that you do when you're tired, but you also catch a yawn very easily from somebody else. And we're by no means the animal that does this. Socially contagious yawning is found across all sorts of social animals like turtles and budgerigars. And you're much more likely to catch a yawn from somebody you know than someone you don't know. So it's a social behaviour. And it's also something that we learn to do. Babies don't yawn contagiously at all. So it's something that we acquire in development. And we thought, well, is this something happening here? Because laughter works the same way. Laughter is also something that a lot of the laughter you do is happening simply because somebody else has laughed. And Robert Probyn showed this very well. But again, you're much more likely to catch a laugh from someone you know than someone you don't know. And it's something that we learn to do. And I just want to show you an example of some contagious laughter. I keep making a noise here. I'm sorry about that. There's a very big lock that's keeping me out of this. And it's letting me know that I'm doing that by enabling me to hit it continuously and make a loud noise. Sorry. So I'm going to show you a quick video with two men in it, okay? These two men are going to start laughing. The man on the right hears something that makes him laugh, and he begins to laugh in a fairly helpless, involuntary way. The man on the left, his colleague, who's trying to present this television program with him, he is not finding it very funny. He, if anything, looks quite worried quite a lot of the time, but he also continuously laughs and smiles, because he's catching just little bits of behavioural contagion happening continuously. So two different kinds of laughs going on. Right from the start, this guy looks like he's trying not to laugh, I have to say. He's already controlling himself.
Okay.
I cry
Worried.
in the midnight hour, yeah. You heard my cry. You bottled up all of my tears.
Worried.
That's why,
Little smile, wonder why that is.
I'm still loving you, oh Lord, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is why he's worried. Very worried.
That was excellent. I was excellent. I certainly did enjoy that. I was going up in the spirit. He's getting the Holy Ghost over here. We want to. He has the spirit.
So yeah, extremely powerful. It really is. The contagious laughter, you will not realise it. And people will often, if you ask them about it, justify why they were laughing. But a great deal of the laughter you produce is happening just because other people have laughed and you've caught it from them. Interestingly, again, or while you find contagious behaviours across all sorts of other animals, only humans show contagious laughter. And we actually have very complex use of laughter by the time we're adults. So when you ask adults what is laughter, what makes you laugh, they will talk about jokes and comedy. But if you look at people, what you find is people laugh when they're with other people. It's primarily a social behavior. You're 30 times more likely to laugh if there's somebody else with you than if you're on your own. It still maintains this mark of play. So children will laugh to show that they are playing. Adults will laugh to show that they are playing, that their intentions are playful. People will sort of moderate what might look like just straight down an aggressive behaviour by, ha, this is funny. My partner and our son pretend to throttle each other on most photographs, and it sometimes worries people, but they're laughing. And we do it all the time. So what few studies there are looking at this have shown if you ask people how often they laugh, and then you look at how often they laugh, everybody underestimates how frequently they laugh. Everyone. We found that people have very strong views and are very consistent in how much they think they laugh, but it doesn't predict how much they laugh at all. Everybody's underestimating it. And it's almost like it's such a normal behaviour, we almost don't remember it. It's extremely dependent on social context. You don't laugh just anywhere and you won't laugh with just anyone. And it's very strongly mediated, not just by other people being with you, but how you feel about those other people. So you laugh with people that you like, you laugh more with people that you love. And the kind of flip side of that is that it's an extraordinary way of increasing your sense of intimacy. So Robin Dunbar's found that if you can get people laughing, they will tell you more intimate information about themselves. They feel closer to you. And we will use it generally as a way of making and maintaining social bonds. So you'll laugh with your friends because it's enjoyable to laugh, but also you're strengthening your bond with your friends. You'll also laugh with someone you might never meet again, because it can be just a really easy way of making an interaction pass more smoothly. There are cultural differences. Cultures vary a lot in where laughter is and isn't considered to be rude. And there's also a really interesting study showing that if you look across the globe, countries with higher levels of historic migration have laughter and smiling behaviours that are more frequent, and they're also less ambiguous. The argument being that if you live in a part of the world where you can't assume that you always will share a common language with people, so somewhere like Western Europe, for example, then behaviours like laughter and smiling, social behaviours like laughter and smiling, become more important because they're ways of communicating in a social setting with somebody in a way that does not require spoken language. People will laugh to show that they're okay, and people will laugh to actively reduce stressful situations. I could give you, again, a whole hour-long talk just on this. What often gets labelled a blooper between Bill Clinton getting the giggles with an ill-tempered Boris Yeltsin, but in fact it's an unbelievably tactical use of social laughter by Bill Clinton to turn around what was an extremely awkward situation into a situation where everybody was laughing and considering it to be very funny. Even Boris Yeltsin by the end of it was going, I am hilarious. And that's an extreme example, but in fact this use of laughter to deal with stressful situations is again one of the most common uses of laughter, and probably one of the most important uses of laughter. The people with whom you can use laughter to feel better about situations are the people with whom you have the closest emotional connections. For example, married couples who can use laughter and smiling in stressful situations to feel less stressed are the couples who stay together for longer and are happier in their relationship. And it's not because laughter is a bit of magic, because it only works if they both do it. It's the sharing laughter that actually helps mediate stress. So most laughter is a social behaviour, and what it lives in is conversation in between these bits of human language, spoken language, which are the most complex sounds and linguistic systems we know of in nature. We drop into this ancient mammal vocalization. Now, Darwin thought that this was an expression of joy. I think the only thing that I would probably add in is that it's an expression of social joy. It's something that we share when we're with other people. And it's never neutral, it's always got meaning. So we play people different kinds of laughs. So that's me laughing spontaneously. I couldn't sing that high, I can't voluntarily get my voice up that high. And here's Carolyn McGettigan faking a laugh. If you play these to people when they're in the scanner, and you don't tell people it's a study of laughter, the brain still distinguishes between them. It responds very differently to the two different kinds of laughs. You get a lot more auditory activation shown in blue to the spontaneous laughter, maybe because you hear sounds that are unambiguous, which you don't hear in other contexts. And actually, more theory of mind networks, I can see Chris and Uta in the audience, that are recruited when you hear somebody laughing intentionally. So if someone's going, ha, 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 maybe they're trying to get someone to like them. Maybe they're trying to show somebody else that they like them. Maybe they're trying to cover up being angry or embarrassed or in pain. Maybe they're trying to feel better about the fact they just dropped a glass of red wine into your handbag. There's all sorts of reasons why people will laugh socially in this more controlled conversational way, and you're always trying to understand it. And in fact, what we find is that the more people are engaging that orofacial mirror system I showed you before when they listen to laughter, the better they are at decoding laughter. So it's not just contagion. If you're getting ready to join in when you hear laughter, you actually understand the laughter better. And the only, go back to comedy that Tara mentioned at the top, the only final finding that we're now kind of going deep into is that if you add laughter onto the ends of things, it makes things seem funnier. It's like, again, you can't ignore it. It's never neutral. It's sticky, and you'll try and find a reason why. Well, why is that laughter happening? Maybe that's because that joke I just heard was funny. So we played people terrible jokes, and if you stick laughter onto the end of it, people find the jokes funnier, and the more spontaneous the laughter, the funnier it makes the joke. So laughter's been described as the shortest distance between two humans, and I've always liked that quote. But it is probably the case that it is a really important emotion for us neuroscientists to study, because it takes us from our emotional world directly and immediately into our social lives. So I think it's definitely the case that we should take laughter a bit more seriously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie. Amazing. We have time for a few questions. Your social laughter really explains why people laugh at the beginning. I'm going to joke. Does anyone have a question? Whilst we're waiting for questions, we've got quite a few people that have just arrived because of the trains. If I could just ask everyone if there's a space next to you, would you mind shuffling up just so that we can let the 20 or so people outside waiting to come in? Thank you so much.
There was a question there.
I was just wondering, is there any reason for the differences in our cognitive
For any one human, it's because it's complete. It can be completely involuntary. It can be as variable as any involuntary sound. So what we're finding is that people vary a great deal in their spontaneous laughter, and it can actually be very hard for people to tell people apart by their spontaneous laughter in a way, if they're unfamiliar, in a way that's still quite easy to tell people apart from their speech, even if you don't know them. Because part of what you do when you produce voluntary vocalizations is you put yourself in there. And the involuntary vocalizations can be, you just sound like a hero or a collection of monkey calls. You know, they are so sort of non-speech-like, and they can be so idiosyncratic, and even within one person, completely variable. So, and it seems to be because they're not under any control. You are not shaping them to be the sounds you would like them to be, which of course your communicative laughter can be, and they tend to be more similar.
Thank you very much for the brilliant talk. There has been some preliminary evidence that adding jokes to group physical activity for people with depression is actually very beneficial. Why do you think it is so?
That's a very good question, because I would like to know more about how that works, because I think if you can get it right, and if people feel engaged and included in humour and laughter, then they do tend to feel better, because you get to share the laughter, and that's where the power comes from. If you feel excluded from it because everyone else seems to get a joke and you don't, that can not just be neutral, that's aversive. And it's not unusual for people with depression to anecdotally experience humour working that way. So if you can find a way of looping people in, then I can see that actually you might then be able to sort of leverage some of that power of the positive aspects of shared laughter. But that's the magic. And it's people won't laugh to command. Even if people are not depressed, I found the hard way. You can't just get people into the lab and say, right, now let's get some laughter out of you, because they won't do it. They're like, oh, what's going on? I don't like this one bit. So it's tough to, people won't laugh randomly. So I'd need to know more about that. It sounds really interesting.
Does anyone compare mental laughter with physical laughter? Does it activate the same brain regions, or do you think it would activate some other brain regions?
Mental laughter?
Yeah, so say if you saw something funny on your phone, or someone wrote you a message, and you say or laugh, like mentally, would it have similar brain regions after you?
It's a really good question, and it would be interesting to actually take that into the scanner. I think it's really interesting if you look at the range of ways people try to put laughter into text-based interactions, like, from like emoticons and rufflecopters through emojis or GIFs or whatever, or just saying laugh. It's always evolving, and my experience of it is you kind of react to the intent of it. You don't laugh in the way that you would do if that person was actually with you and they'd laughed together with you. So I suspect that the shared element of that is going to be harder to achieve, because it's, apart from anything else, it's just separated in time and place. And you are more likely to laugh if that person was there. What it means in terms of the brain systems, I don't know, and it would be very interesting to look at that. Good idea.
One final question that Laura picked. Is there a difference in representation for spontaneous laughter that arises from an awkward situation compared to a deliberately humorous situation?
I don't know, and I can't lie to you. It's much, much harder to look at the production networks for laughter, just generally because it's hard to get people laughing in the scanner. I mean, I've managed it a couple of times, but it's tough. So actually pushing that forward into awkward versus not awkward, it's a pipe dream for me at this stage. But I think one of the things that's interesting about awkward situations is that they are frequently situations in which you should not be laughing. And they very frequently, from people's descriptions of it, it doesn't happen when people are on their own in that awkward situation. There is somebody else with them, and they are interacting with that person. Even if they aren't saying anything, they both start laughing. Sophie Meekings, who did her PhD with me, we went to a conference in America, and it was a very, very, very serious talk about speech production, where this guy was started out by the word pot, and then he was going to how we would then say the word before that, and the word he said before that was toss. So his sentence was now building up to toss pot, which I think was something to do with pottery. But in the UK, we were the only two British people there. We just looked at each other and went, and then we were crying with laughter, like the chairs were moving, people were turning around. If I'd been on my own, I probably would have put that on Twitter, toss pot, but I wouldn't have laughed. So there's something about, I think it still remains, there's always that social kind of amplifier of it that leads to it, and I think that's often at the heart of the uncontrollable aspect of some of those kinds of laughter.
Thank you so much. Please join me in helping thanks Sophie.